system on fire. Military science fiction podcast. Untold stories every Wednesday. Military science fiction podcast. Discussion, interviews, reviews, and rants. Military science fiction podcast.
I have questions, so we should go ahead and start the show. Today,
Yes.
today we're going to talk about blowing things up in military science fiction, and we're very fortunate to have a resident expert who is very humble and says he has not been on the team for a little while, but was an explosive expert with his police department. So, Josh, do you want to talk a little bit about what you did?
I prefer the term resident expert-ish. Resident expert-ish. Yeah.
He's
I think I've said it before. Yeah. So I probably talked about it before, but in my previous life, I was on the Wichita Police Department, and for the last, I think for the last 3 years, I was on the EOD team, the bomb team, and that was an experience, and we covered a whole range of things from the actual taking care of like found explosive devices and rendering them safe to the way our special ops works is that the bomb techs are the breachers for the SWAT team. So the SWAT team does not have their own explosives. It's all us. And so if they have to do an explosive breach, we stack up with SWAT, and then we go up, we place the breach, we detonate the breach, and then we get out of the stack, and then SWAT goes and does what they do. And we also did a lot of hazardous environment operations too, where if you're talking about like drug labs, meth labs, mushroom grows, marijuana grows, all that kind of stuff, we trained in that too. And so we
You guys are experts in
trained.
growing drugs.
Yes, I know. I know how to make meth. That's one of the funny things that I like to say is I'm probably one of the only guys that I know that has actually sat and watched meth being made and it be completely legal.
For mushrooms, I'm just
Um,
imagining you like busting into the dankest of closets. Um,
Mushroom grows are actually extremely elaborate
yeah.
because of the way you have to do it. We had a mushroom grow one time where me and a buddy of mine were in Kim suits for, we were probably suited up for like 4 hours. And in the Kim suit, it's not like, the movie Outbreak, we're in there in the full body, yellow sealed suits. We're in basically a paper suit that's sealed with chemical tape. And then you have the breathing mask and the SCBA, and you look like a scuba diver walking around. But we were in suits for so long, we had to do hot swaps with the bottles because we were running out of air. And so basically, you leave everything on, and then one of your partners comes, pulls the bottle off the rig, and then you hold your breath while you slap another bottle in, and then you go back to work because those things are really kind of crazy. But it was really fun. I learned a lot about how explosives are made. We had several classes on explosive triggers and wiring and X-raying and all of that stuff, so we can identify the source or where the switch is at, where the cap is at, that kind of thing. And it was really fun. It really kind of took my interest in police work to another level because I saw once I got into it, that's all I wanted to do. And that's really the only thing I miss about not being on the department was being on the team. Driving the robot was probably the funnest job I had on the team. We had the big F6 robot that you see in most bomb team scenarios with it's the big one with the single arm that has all the cameras on it. And that's fun because you can operate it by wire or you can operate it remotely. And
You
it's
guys didn't
got
have the Ed
five.
209?
They had the Wally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I always called it Johnny for short circuit.
Yeah.
Um,
You don't remember Ed 209, Josh? You give me a blank
I
look.
it's
RoboCop?
it
RoboCop?
Oh, dude, it's been so long since I've seen that movie. I only saw it once, so I wouldn't have got the
Okay.
reference.
I'll listen.
But we had one of those, and then we had a smaller one that could do kind of go into smaller places. But those were really fun to drive and learn how to. We actually had to take it apart in Kansas City. We went to an F6 class, and we had to take the entire thing apart down to its bolts. And so when we got done, I took a picture and sent it to my boss, and I was like, I'm not sure if this is going back together because that's a lot of parts. But it's a good thing we did because we found out that whoever had taken it apart before us and put it back together had put the wheels on backwards. And so like for months, our remote operating system wasn't working with the presets for how you can set the robot up, and we didn't know why. And we called the techs, and the techs didn't know why, and it was strange. Well, then we took it apart and looked at it, and when we went to put it back together, we were like, I think those wheels were on backwards, and the wheels,
Red
the
was up.
hubs have a sensor on it,
Mm.
and because it was flipped, the sensor wasn't reading the hub, so the computer couldn't tell what spot the wheels were at, so it couldn't see where the rest of the robot. Once we put the wheels on, everything worked. It
I'm
was
surprised there
crazy.
was no error related to that. But then I also want to
Yeah,
say,
I
I work
mean,
for a police department. I'm amazed to let a bunch of cops do that. But you guys are special,
yeah,
obviously. So
yeah, 100%. I mean,
They were special.
my first day at the bomb range, we were doing explosive training, and the team leader came up and he handed me a stick of dynamite, and then he handed me it's a bomb tool, but it's kind of like a Leatherman, but it's made specifically for bomb techs. And he said, "Hey, I want you to lace this dynamite." And I said, "Okay, I don't know what that means." And he said, "You take this punch, and on the Leatherman, it looks like a really sharp pin that folds out."
all,
And he
yeah.
said, "Just punch it through the dynamite a couple of times, and then lace the det cord through." And I go, Boss, I don't know that you're telling me the right thing here. I think you're trying to set me up.
The
Like
left-handed
this
monkey
doesn't,
wrench situation. Yeah.
yeah, this doesn't sound right. Punching dynamite does
You
not
punch
sound
a hole
good."
through that dynamite. I'll be over here behind this barrier.
Right.
And that's what he did. He was like, "Here, you go ahead and do that." And then the whole team walked away, and I'm like, you guys got me. And they're like, "No, go ahead and do it." And I did, and it worked. But that there was so many things like that on the team. You get a whole bunch of ribbon from guys that have been doing it for a while. But it was really fun. We got to detonate a lot of different kinds of explosives, and one of the biggest things, the takeaways that I have and that I've tried to incorporate in my writing is, and this goes with saying, a lot of Hollywood explosions do not represent what actual explosions look like, because you get the big fireball and all of
They're
that,
like
and
gasoline explosions, right?
Yeah.
yeah, it's usually diesel fuel.
Well, and
That
Josh, I was wondering, like, this may play into your story, so please go ahead if it is.
Yeah.
Can you take us down to like the base level, what's happening? Like we have some kind of igniter, starting an explosive material that has like inherent energy. It is released. That causes damage, and then there's overpressure of pushing out, atmosphere, right? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. There's an initiator, we call it the cap, that is, it's a very small, I mean, it's like that long and about that big around. And that is connected to its own wire. And when you are setting the cap, like, so let's just say you're using C4 or C2 or whatever it is, um, you push that in, and you see, people in movies, they push the cap into the explosive. And that cap is usually set to some kind of det cord. You can use, like, we used 50 and 100 grain det cord, sometimes 200 det cord if we're making a matrix without a cap. Um, but sometimes it can also be shock tube. And shock tube is what you would use if you're doing like an explosive breach, and you have a charge that you're putting somewhere. That shock tube um, it doesn't explode. It just carries the shock through your initiator. So
So
whether it's a
a certain
non-electric,
voltage hits the material,
right?
and that's what. Okay.
Yeah, you've either got like a remote electric shock, which you can attach this electric detonator to, and then do it remotely, which is how we do a lot of stuff. But if you're doing breaching, it's a non-electric um, pull igniter. And so if you ever see somebody like they've got some kind of OD green, almost PVC looking pipe, and they pull like a pin out of it. That's a non-electric initiator. You pull that, and that starts the chain reaction that detonates the cap.
So
So you've got the
that
cap.
thermal technically? Is that heat if it does that? Or is it like a slow
It's
electric charge of some kind?
it's a charge. It's a charge. And that shock travels through the tube into the cap, and then the cap explodes.
Mhm.
So the cap sets off the bigger explosion, and then you're absolutely right about the overpressure. The overpressure actually is the blast wave is what causes most of the damage that you see. And in buildings, there's an effect called collapsing shock waves, and that's why you see inside confined spaces, you see way more damage than you would on like an outside. Like a grenade goes off outside, you'll see the and then of course the grenade has shrapnel and stuff, so you got to deal with that. But a lot of times, if it's on the ground, you won't see a lot of surrounding damage. You'll see the hole.
Mhm.
But when you go inside that overpressure, those collapsing shock waves, what they do is they bounce off the walls and come back, but then they also start bouncing off each other. So you've got
And those
all these
shockwaves
bounce.
move at the speed of sound, right?
I can't speak to that specifically. I'd have that part of the knowledge is something that I've lost over the years of being gone. Um, it is fast and they are powerful, and it only takes. I can't remember what the PSI is that the body can take, but there's a certain level of PSI where like a certain level of PSI will rupture eardrums. Another certain level of PSI will damage internal organs or liquefy internal organs. Um,
You don't have to
and
remember the PSI. That's what Chat
Yeah.
GPT is
So
for.
the
yeah,
internet says that the shockwave initially travels at supersonic speeds,
Okay.
which
yeah,
would be up to like 400 meters per second. But it also depends on elevation, which is interesting. So depending on
yeah.
what, yeah.
And
So
the,
you
the
basically
thing
got,
about
oh, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
I just, I guess thinking about this in like science fiction terms, you know. So we've got like if we were going to put this in something else, we've got an energy source interacting with a material with like a latent energetic like potential of some kind. And then
Yeah,
as that is activated, that material, you know, whatever it is we've excited in there explodes. And then the movement of that against the atmosphere is what creates like that energy exploding outwards creates that shock wave that then bounces off other surfaces in the area.
right.
And
Can I
that
ask
moving.
can I ask a
Yeah.
technical question, Josh? If in the future we were to come up with more efficient or better conventional explosives, what would the advantage that they would have to have be? Would it be making a faster shock wave? Would it be making more thermal uh,
I
output?
think it would
What
just depend on what you're trying to do with the explosive,
Mhm.
right? Like,
like say
because
say a future replacement for C4.
then you'd want to have a lot of explosive pressure, a lot of explosive power. The rate usually it's judged in pounds of TNT, and that's like you have a 30,000 pound bomb. That's 30,000 pounds of TNT equivalent, right? That's what the zero level is. And so you want to determine what you're trying to do with that explosive, like with C4. There's also different levels of C too, because you have C1, C2, C3, C4. And it depends on what you're trying to do with that explosive. I've seen
Blow stuff
uh
up.
yeah. Well, and you have the size of charge too. Like we went out with Air Force EOD to detonate a lot of their used stuff. Military EOD is a lot different than civilian EOD um, because we're really careful about destruction and they don't care. And so we do a lot of math specifically where we're like if we're going to set a breach, we do a lot of math to determine how big the charge is going to be, how much overpressure that's going to create, and how many feet that is going to cause damage to down to the inch. We can tell you this size of explosive in this space will create this amount of damage. And the Air Force or the military, they don't care about that. They're just getting rid of stuff. And so I think it was about, I want to say it was about 100 pounds of C4 and C4 equivalent that we set off in a bomb range up north of here. And holy crap, that was a massive explosion. I mean, we were really far away, and we were in a bunker, and we still felt the overpressure, the wave come out. And I was like, holy crap.
That's what they do
But
when in the military when you have like this day where they demonstrate. You have it was in the infantry, so you have one day where they demonstrate the EOD guys
Hmm.
stuff to us, and they take you out to this range and they show you all the different explosives, demonstrate how to use them, and then they set them in this, one spot, and they set like C4, det cord, everything that they have, they set it there, and then you go back into this bunker that's like hundreds of yards away,
yeah,
and they set it off, and then you come out and there's a swimming pool that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
right. Well, and the other thing too is, especially in terms of like futuristic sci-fi stuff, like are you using the explosive to push something else, um
Well, let
like
me
an
put it this way.
IED?
There's something I've been curious about is EMP. Right now, to create an EMP, you have to set off a nuclear device, but there's experiments going on to try to create an EMP through the use of conventional explosives.
Yeah.
Um, how much more advanced would conventional explosives have to be to power a localized EMP?
Well, I think if you're talking about in the future and you've got, intergalactic travel and spaceships and all of that, you're
Well,
probably
let's
going to
say
have the
closer future than that, even.
yeah. I don't honestly, I don't think it's that far off. I mean,
It all comes into energy production, right? Like,
yeah, you've got to create the energy that's going to create the EMP. And they're already making a lot of strides in miniaturizing that kind of technology. So I don't think that would be that far off. I mean, I use EMP stuff in weaponized where they're orbs, like a baseball size orb, and it's not a super powerful EMP. It's not going to take out like a whole city or whatever, but it'll take out a block or so, and do what you need to do. But again, I think in military terms, in terms of future combat, with explosive, you're always trying to do something with it, and
yeah.
a lot of those times you're talking about like fragmentation, incendiary, and that kind of thing. Like thermite is a really good example of that, where thermite is very high temperature, but it's also that temperature goes away really fast. It's
Hmm.
a blast of really extreme thermal temperature that doesn't last very long. Um, but like if you're pushing like an IED that, you see a Humvee get blown up, it's not the explosive pressure that does the damage, it's the projectile that they've formed and the shape penetrator that the explosive pushes. Um, and a lot of times that shape charge is what causes the majority of the damage. You still got all the overpressure and stuff, but um, the interesting thing I think, and comes from a quote unquote bomb geek standpoint, is if you're using explosives in the future for something along the lines of breaching or something like that, when you're doing a shape charge, like when we do explosive breaching, if we're going through a wall, we'll tamp that explosive with water, um, because water does not compress under explosive pressure. It has to go somewhere. And so what we'll do is I'm trying to get the angle right. Like, say this is the explosive and over here is the door. We would take IV bags and duct tape those IV bags to the back of the explosive. And what that does is it forces the majority of the energy from the explosion the other way because it bounces off the water and goes back. So you've got one explosive wave that goes, and then when it bounces off the water, it goes the other direction. And so you tamp that water, that charge, and that'll work in many circumstances, but that's also why the human body takes so much damage under explosive pressure because we're what 90% water, and that water doesn't compress, so it has to go somewhere. So if you get hit by a blast wave, that blast wave is pushing the water. And so if you picture like a jug of water or a water bottle and you're shaking it around, the water's doing this. So when your body gets hit by a blast wave, that water inside is doing this inside your body, and it's just shredding organs all over the place. And that's what causes a lot of the body internal damage. But coming up with a way to tamp explosive that doesn't come up that is not water based would be an interesting technology to see.
What else could they
Um,
use?
I maybe like a force field type
Yeah, field
deal.
technology of some
If
kind.
you
Yeah,
could come up with a force field that could push the energy a different way, you're still. I mean, if you get really technical, you're still going to have to worry about physics and what's that going to do? How are you
Physics.
generating the
Who cares
force
about
field and all that
physics?
kind of stuff, right? But if you're just doing rule of cool, force field could work. Um,
One
or you
thing
could
that,
have Go ahead.
go ahead. I say one thing that I've kind of taken as a given in some of my military science fiction is that in at some point in the future, there's going to be a point where hand-thrown hand grenades with explosive and shrapnel are not going to be practical because the armor is going to get to the point where you have to use a bigger and bigger explosive to penetrate it. And at some point, that's going to be big enough that you can't throw the thing far enough where it'll be safe for you to throw it. So you're if you're going to have those, you're going to have some kind of launcher.
Well, that's why I was saying about like what are you doing with the explosive? Because like what you're talking about having like in for instance, in your I think it's Drop Trooper where they're in uh um battle armor,
Hmm.
right? Those would take a lot of explosive pressure. But that a lot of that explosive pressure is going to be shared across the surface of that armor. So you're going to want an explosive that is a very uh, tight beam focused charge that's going to hit in a small spot, so that energy is not deflected across,
Like
right?
what they do
So you
with the anti-tank weapons now, that they make a little spear of plasma out of the
or
metal that they hit, right?
yeah, or
yeah,
the depleting, right?
exactly.
I mean, I
So
think
you'd
about
want some kind of a smart weapon that I was talking to my wife about this the other day. The bombs that the B2s dropped last week or the week before, where they're talking about the bunker buster bombs and all of that. Um they're designed to punch down into the ground and then explode when they
like all the
detect the
energy down.
void. Yeah, but
Yeah.
they have a system in place where they detect where the actual bunker is at, right? So, and they have fail safes. Somehow they can detect if it's a fake void because basically it goes down. And you think of a bunker buster, it goes down and it senses that void where the bunker is at, and then it explodes. But it's got a system in place where like some advanced bunkers will have fake voids above them, so the bomb will explode before it actually gets into the bunker, and these spark bombs can detect whether that void is false or
It's
not, which
amazing to
I don't
me.
know.
It's amazing to
Yeah,
me that that technology. It's just
right. I don't know how they do
crazy.
it,
Let's
but again, you'd want to have like some kind of spark munition where if you're talking about a hand thrown smart grenade or something like that, it would detect localized like where the enemy armor is, like what direction, what angle, and all of that, and then could orient itself somehow
Well,
to.
the hand thrown grenades they do have in that technology, they aren't they don't just use explosives. They use like this is kind of BS, but hand wavy 'em, but they have they put out sintered metal, and they have like an explosive at the core that's a shaped charge that will send out kind of a spears of plasma, but it
Yeah,
all goes in a wave going this way.
directed. Yeah. I mean, you think about, okay, what is a grenade? It's like close indirect fire. And so, handheld at that level, we're in close combat. It's really just an item. I'm trying to get into a space I don't have direct eyesight on. And if I'm trying to deny the enemy, destroy the enemy, all the cool things you could do with tech in that size that could be hand thrown, or, we hate drones, but getting into like essentially
Huh.
it's a drone without a motor. You're just like sending it into a place to
Yeah.
do a thing away from you. And so there's a lot of cool stuff you could do there. Like I was just thinking about breaching, like,
I am a 30-second bomb.
yeah, I mean, well, if your goal, I mean, it kind of comes back to your goal, like you were saying, Josh. Like if my goal is to get through this door, okay, I don't necessarily need an explosive device to do that, but there are some other extras with that. Like I shock the enemy, I, deny them like concealment. I do all kinds of things if that when that explosion goes through the door. And if you separate those things into tasks that the device performs, like there's a lot of cool stuff you could do there tech wise, breaking it down that way.
Yeah.
We call that grenade, but the grenade or charge, breaching charge is actually accomplishing a lot of different things. We just don't always think of it that way, you know.
Well, and there's like a lot of cool tech, a lot of cool explosives that are not actually bombs, that do work. For instance, I don't know the technical term for it, because it was one of the Air Force pieces, but it was they called it a rope. And it's a long coil of explosive rope, and I assume that it had some kind of C4, Simtex kind of material, that it was made out of, but it was adhesive, and you could roll this rope out. And what they did was they took an armored APC, and laid it across the middle of the armored roof in a long, like they snaked it over the top, and then set it off. And the armor that was probably three-quarters of an inch or an inch thick or whatever it was, because of the localized explosion, it cut through the armor, but then also bent it all down. So the top of the APC went like this all the way, like the
It's a bad
length of
day.
the explosive snake. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course you've got to get close enough to put that on, right? But if you're talking about going through like an armored, like a station or a ship or something, and you're talking about going through a hall, and you're trying to make a specific entry point, maybe having something like, like a drone deployment device, like, like maybe a spider type creature that can move along, and it's deploying this explosive snake around where you're trying to get. And then you detonate it, and the hull goes in, and you can make your entry. Those kind of things are some of the interesting things that I like to think about, that you can do different ways to defeat, um, your obstacles.
Mhm.
But like with explosive grenades, like they're fragmentation grenades. And so, again, a lot of the damage doesn't come from the actual explosion. It comes from the bits of shrapnel that the grenade is made out of. Same thing with claymores. The danger with claymores is not the explosive inside them; it's the
Those little
ball
ball
bearing,
bearings. Yeah.
The
that
danger is
comes
typically
shooting out
right
at you at
back,
subsonic speeds that'll rip through your body. Like that's the bad
right?
day.
It's not the fall that kills you, it's a sudden stop.
100%. And doing stuff, we're talking about EMP and trying to defeat, like armored soldiers or whatever, something like a shock system that could disrupt, even if it doesn't, like if it's not an EMP where it's not completely killing the system, but even just disrupting the system enough where you've got enough electric energy that disrupts what's going on inside, uh, the armor suit. That would be cool. Having some kind of like a electricity, energy bomb grenade, something that you throw out. I've got, in weaponized, you talk about like flashbangs and stuff. I've got an ordnance called a dazzler. I can't remember what I called the technical term, but it's like a flashbang, but like stepped up, like to the nth degree. And it's almost like a one cluster of flashbang in one deal. And so you throw it, and then it does the light, it does the sound, but it also does a electric kind of energy emission system where it disorients, electrical systems and computer systems at the same time, because everybody in my universe has, computers in their heads and all of that. So you have all of the senses, the sound and the light, and then the electric, energy disruption. You've got that all wrapped into one, but then you have multiple detonations that are going off in sequence, not simultaneously. And so it's not one poof, and then you have to survive, or you have to push through that. It's multiple and it's all random. So you have, a dozen of these little itty bitty explosions that are going off at random intervals. That really kind of overwhelm. And one of the interesting things that I thought about when you first said the grenade thing a couple of minutes ago is when we were learning how to deploy the M203, and I think you guys probably have some experience in that.
I like the
Um, one of one of the interesting things that I found in learning to shoot it and handle it and how and why to deploy that weapon system is uh, the s- the sound. One of the things they talked about in the class was the not the sound of the weapon firing, but the sound of the detonations, because that's what will freak out a lot of people. You get a lot of those poof 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 of the detonations from the round. That sound will keep people down because they know
No,
that
they
there's
don't. I don't
explosions.
believe they issue 203s anymore.
No, I mean we had 203s, but
They
Yeah,
now
I did too.
they have like this HK pistol looking grenade launcher now.
oh really? Oh
Mm.
yeah, I've seen pictures of that. Yeah.
Is that
I
the
can't,
one that has like the six chambers, like a
no,
kind of a
no, it's a
big
single
revolver?
shot, but it's like really small, and you have it has like a folding stock, and it looks like a
Oh yeah.
really stubby pistol, and you
Yeah. I've seen those. We have the M203. Well, we had it on our M16s when we had M16s, and then we got the M4 variant. And when we carried, you've got a vest with all the munitions in it and stuff.
yeah.
But those things, it was freaking. That was better than carrying the 240. But it was still worse than just carrying your uh M4 because
Okay,
when you
it's
dip.
called the M320.
M320. So the Marines still have some 203s.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
the 320 can be used under the barrel, but what I've heard is that mostly it's used just you like have it on your pack, you break it out, and they
Yeah.
don't
Well,
actually
because it's
go in
really
the
clunky. It's kind of ineffective almost to have it on your gun. It's cool looking, like it looks great, especially on an M4. But it's clunky because how many times are you actually going to use that? But then it adds weight to the weapon. It affects how you actually hold the weapon to fire it, even if you're just
yeah.
firing the
Because you never use that one
rifle.
for qualification, which was always
100%, right? So you're firing a weapon system that you've never qualified on because you don't qualify with a 203 on your gun. Um, and also like
I
when we
qualified
carried
with the
it,
203.
did you?
oh,
I had to qualify. Yeah, I didn't have to, but during our infantry officers basic course, we qualified with the 203.
I mean, I
well,
qualified with a
you have to
203. I mean,
qualify with the
qualifying.
203, but you're not shooting
Yeah,
the M4 for qual with a
Oh,
203 on it.
oh yeah, okay,
yeah,
I
yeah.
see what you
That's
mean.
what I mean. Like every time we
Yeah,
had to swap out weapons on the soldiers that were issued those because it was. I always thought that was a little ridiculous, but otherwise
yeah,
you just couldn't. You didn't have range time to make sure. So
for sure. And how many times do you actually get like I shot the 203 in tech school, but they were smoke rounds. They weren't uh
We
HE
didn't even shoot
rounds.
smoke. We shot the blue powder rounds.
yeah, I shot. I mean,
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Well, I think ours was orange powder,
I was
but
gonna say I'm kind of
same.
surprised if you were shooting HE rounds in the police department, but I mean, I'll
I think
nothing.
you.
No,
Are you
no,
talking
no.
about
In
you talking about the Air
in
Force?
the Air Force, in the
Oh,
Air
Air Force. I'm
Force.
sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I have a funny
because
story.
I was security forces in the Air Force, so we got to
This is
shoot like
true.
we were the infantry of the army, so we did all the infantry stuff.
So I ran a 203 range on Fort Bliss, and or I don't know if anybody knows what an oryx is. An oryx is like an elk and an antelope smashed together and probably
Yes.
even
Mhm.
bigger. And so they have long pointed horns, and they've been known to charge, like at least people said this, they charged vehicles. But anyway, we're out there doing the range against the in Oro Grande. Will Crudge knows what I'm talking about. But so you've got like a mountain behind you, or I mean, I'm sorry, downrange, and kind of these like fake little buildings and whatnot, and we're shooting into it. And all these oryx just go like wandering through the firing area, and
Oh man,
and we're like, oh crap, we got to do this. Like how, how far away are the dumb things? And we're like trying to do like figure out how far away they are and like, well, just shoot one and see if you scare them away. And and they didn't move. And so
Those are imported like for game farms, right?
they imported them. They like took off. So they're now, I won't call them native, but they're definitely in the area.
They're
Um,
feral.
like White Sands, North Fort Bliss. But anyway, so we did that range with like oryx in the background that were just watching us like we were dummies, and it was a lot of fun.
Nice.
And
Yeah, but I mean, I shot it once in tech school, and then we carried it, and like I don't remember. I don't remember. I'm sure maybe we did once or twice, but I don't remember requalling with the 203.
Mhm.
That it was just one of those deals where you shoot it once and you familiarize yourself, and then you press on. Same thing with the 240. I don't remember requalling with the 240. I didn't carry it very often. Um,
We were
but
pretty fortunate. I
I
mean, we
never
got to
had a
call
240. We had
annually.
M60s when I was in.
Yeah, we had both. We went from the 60 to the 240. And then I don't I can't remember if we ever carried the saw.
Yeah, that's one
Um,
thing I never did get to fire was the M249. I never got to fire the saw.
yeah, that
But
was fun to shoot.
we are well. Let's get back to explosives, and specifically future explosives. Um, what are some unconventional, like not just blowing stuff up, applications for future explosive? Like what is the most out there thing you can think of that an advanced future explosive will be used
Wait, isn't there
for?
the atomic explosion engine? What's that one called? Where
That's
we just,
Orion.
the Orion, we just set off nuclear explosions and
Well,
the.
I was assuming we were
I know,
talking non-nuclear for this,
I
but
know,
if
I'm
you want
kidding.
to go nuclear,
But sorry, Josh, go ahead.
Um, I think, obviously kinetic weapons come into play at some point. Um, when you're talking about military application, but those are kinetic, not explosive. But I think some kind of smart weapon, almost like the bunker buster, if you've got like some kind of like I have in weaponized, I've got micro missiles that are smart weapons that tie into the warcom for the military guys, and so they've got orbiting what I call void hawk drones that are not like big unmanned aerial things. They're like um I don't know, like the size of a chair almost, in terms of like length. I was trying to think of something really simple to compare it to. But they create this kind of smart network on the battlefield, and so these micro missiles, you shoot them out of the your shoulder blade in their armor. The launcher kind of comes out, and then the missiles shoot up, and almost like a tomahawk, where it shoots up and then turns and goes towards its target. But those micro missiles where they're shooting up and then flying to the target, but then also having like target detection systems where if they're punching through buildings, you can punch through multiple rooms to get to where you're going before the explosion goes off, like the smart void detection thing for the bunker busters. That would be cool. Um, I think having even something like the first word that pops into my mind is a sticky bomb, but not almost like an explosive gel, where it's in a like some kind of a hardened case in like uh, a chassis, a missile deal. You shoot that into a room, and then that explodes, and it sends the gel everywhere, almost like a water balloon where it's exploding
Mhm.
and throwing water everywhere. And then that gel has a secondary explosion that causes everything that it touches, where the gel just explodes, almost like dead cord, right? So it's an omnidirectional explosion with the gel, but then you get almost a 360 explosion inward and outward of the place where you're trying to destroy. And so you add that to like the collapsing shock waves and multiple detonations and stuff, you'd have like a lot of explosive power in a charge like that or in a weapon system like that. Um, Even, explosive tip rounds sound cool, but there's only so much that you can do on an explosive tip round. Like it's just going to go bang. It's not going to do anything interesting, right? Um,
what if it's
uh,
what if it's not an explosive tip round? What I mean, imagine something that's based on the what's it called? The heat round? What's the one that we shoot now
Razor.
out of for anti-armor use that that we were talking about that hits and creates that
The
plasma.
DU, depleted
No,
uranium.
not the play uranium. The one that, yeah, I can't think of what it's called. But anyway, it's a. What if you could do that with a handheld weapon? If you had a warhead that could had a powerful enough explosive in a small enough space that when it hit armor, somebody's armor, like if you're wearing advanced body armor, that it would penetrate so fast through that armor that it would create a plasma to penetrate it.
That would be cool. I think another type of ordnance that would be cool would be like um a not a tractor, but a latch, an attach on explosive, where like if you're dealing with let's just say the size of a round, like a 2 or 3 inch round, right? And you're going against armor, and it's got the penetration, but say you're still dealing with ricochet possibilities and all of that. Having a round that actually just attaches itself to the armor before it explodes, so you know that it's there, right? It like digs in almost like a tick or something like that, and it burrows into the armor really quickly.
Right.
It's got like some kind of mag clamp that it clamps on, and then clamps on, does a really quick burrow, and then explodes inside. So you're not exploding outside
Kind
the
of like those
ammo.
rounds they're
Armor
using in
against.
Dune.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's
Uh,
armor against the person then, because once you get inside, now
yeah,
that's your,
And by the way, I was right. It's heat. It's high explosive anti-tank. It's a
uh-huh.
shaped charge, a cone-shaped liner of metal, often copper, surrounded by high explosives. Upon impact, the explosive detonates, collapsing the cone, and creating a high-velocity jet of molten metal that melts and penetrates the armor.
yeah. An interesting thing about that is those type of explosive penetrators, they're shaped in reverse. So like if the cone looks like this when it's in the round, it comes out looking like this because it's shaped around the explosive, and then
Mhm.
the explosive pushes it and forms it in the opposite direction, and it goes like that. But you could do literally you could do that with we do that with water on the bomb team. Whenever you talk about rendering safe devices, a lot of people talk about cutting the wires, and we never cut wires. The only time you would ever cut a wire is if it was like the best example would be like a suicide vest on somebody that doesn't want to blow themselves up. Then you would deal with cutting the wires. But the problem with cutting his wires is it's not a simple red versus blue wire, because all wires can be red or all wires can be blue. And so you've got to do a lot of work to find where the
Where's
wire
the
is
power
going. Does it
source?
go to
Where's
the
yeah.
source? Yeah. So we usually just blow the devices up. We've got this thing called a pan. It's a percussion actuated non-electric, and basically it's an aluminum stainless steel type shotgun barrel that's on a stationary rig that you actually load a shotgun shell into the back end of it, and then you fill it with water and then cap it with a plastic cap on the end. And then when you set it off, it fires that shotgun round, and the pressure, again, the water doesn't compress, so the pressure shoots the water out in a almost like a water spear, and the spear of water will cut through. What we use, will X-ray the device and find where the source is, and then we'll shoot that spear of water through the source and just eliminate the problem of the explosive by eliminating the source and the switch and everything else. Um,
I
and
mean, this is all
yeah,
that's cool. I mean, this is all just science, which is cool.
right,
Yeah, physics,
yeah.
science, physics. I mean, I guess to bring us,
Science.
we're almost since we're hitting the end of our time. I guess I want to, I've just been on a Peter Hamilton streak lately, thanks to Josh. And
You're
Hamilton,
welcome.
yeah. So, we're talking about relatively, I wouldn't say near future, near future things that like kinetic weapons are still necessary or a tool that are used. And then Hamilton is getting into places where, like, he just used this thing in the Dreaming Void that like utilize M Hawking radiation to create a like localized singularity that basically just collapses everything in a localized sphere and just
Yeah,
erases it from existence. And so
right.
you think about like, okay, what like that's super cool, and it was cool when he did it. But then now you're kind of wondering, like, okay, if people can do that, what, you know, how does that, like in the previous series
It's
too,
no
like basically,
fun.
it's still, yeah, no, it's not fun. And he had some other weapons where, they're like he had a whole bunch of like hand wringing about should we destroy these aliens that are trying to like annihilate us. And from a MILSFPOD perspective, I'm thinking yes, but
Yeah.
but I get why they didn't do that, but they created a kind of
Peter
similar.
F. Hamilton is too British.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think we could talk. I really am curious what his politics are because I see
Oh,
needs of a lot of different
I
things.
think it's pretty obvious what his politics are, but that's
I
just
don't
me.
know though. I don't know. He keeps like throwing out references to other things, but
He does a really good job of coloring both sides, I think.
yeah,
Even if maybe he weighs heavily to one side, he still does a
If you look
fair
at all his
representation of the
sympathetic
other side.
POV characters
yeah,
that are supposed
For
to be
sure.
right and wind up being right, they are
Yeah,
all cut from the same cloth.
for
and
sure.
he's not Ian Banks, and I really like Ian Banks, but well, he's Scottish anyway, but um. But where I was going with that is that I think when you're thinking up, we're talking about explosions, but obviously if we're just applying, the release of energy in a localized space to accomplish a goal, you can definitely go too far with it, and it's just not interesting. I mean, I've read some other books recently where the authors just were just dropping nukes. Like, I think
Right.
I've grown up with like dropping a nuke, and we still live in a world where dropping a nuke has so many repercussions. Like just having a localized radiation event has so many repercussions on the economy, on health, on everything that I think you really got to think about that. And everything that we've been talking about can be really cool. And it's just not fun sometimes to go all the way. Like, yeah, you could drop a nuke, but what, like, have you really thought through everything that that's going to do?
Depends
I,
on where you're dropping. And are you on a
well,
asteroid or are you on a habitable planet?
that's true. I mean,
If you're on an
the last book I
asteroid, you can
read,
drop all the nukes you want. Sure.
what was I can barely see it from here. Crap. I don't know. They were in, oh shoot. What's the country that's on the edge of Iraq? Or it's not a country, it's like part of Iraq, part of Turkey, the Kurds, Kurdistan.
Kurdistan?
Yeah. And they're just dropping nukes all over Kurdistan. I was like, why are you doing that?
What book is this?
Let me grab it. It's Exordia, that's what it was called.
What's it called?
Uh, Seth Dickinson. Um,
What's it about?
Exordia. So I have a hard time recommending this book, although it starts out, it's about a woman talking to an alien, and that was like pretty, I like that. And then it jumps to like they're trying to find this ship that's like exotic matter that crash landed in, Iraqi controlled Kurdistan. And a lot of the characters are Kurdish, and it really wants to dig into the history of how we've crapped on the Kurds. And okay, that's all fine. But then like a lot of the characters they're just not sympathetic people and they're dropping nukes on villages and it's
You should
just
read um, John Ringo's Legacy of the Elden Nada. In the
yeah.
first couple of books, I mean, they're just dropping nukes all over everywhere on Earth. So
The thing I don't like about nukes, especially when it comes to like mill sci-fi and writing battles and stuff, is that it takes it takes away a lot of the like tension building and a lot of the
Right.
interesting things that you can do with smaller level explosions. If you drop a nuke, there's nothing you can do with that. But if you throw a grenade in somewhere, you can jump away or have an injury or there's so many other levels of uh uh
if you're in a Starship Troopers style mobile infantry battle suit, you can jump away from a nuke.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, that is true. But then you've got to raise the stakes. So like, what's worse than a nuke? And
Right.
you've got to go if you're going to a nuke level, regardless of whether it's a nuke or not, you always go to the world enders. And that's not fun, and it's not realistic, really. But having smart munitions, that's fun. I like having weapons um that are not like Babylon 5 beam weapons where it's like a straight. I like having pulses, different, almost like Star Wars as kind of blaster deals where you can have it's stitching through. And I think that's a really good visual, like stitching through a wall or a bowl cut or something like that, or
And
getting shot multiple times. I think those are
one
really good
thing
visuals.
explosions do too, like yes, they're great visuals and they reset the playing field. So you can have a static situation we throw a grenade, we set off an explosion, and now we've changed the playing field so you can have, people will respond in different ways. And also they don't
Yep.
always go the way you want, so you might think something's going to happen when you throw that grenade and maybe it gets thrown back at you or maybe the
100%.
wall
So,
collapses and you didn't expect that, you
you know,
know.
realistic use of grenades in modern, warfare, you throw a grenade, it might not even kill one person.
Yeah.
Right.
It depends on where it lands, on how much armor they're wearing, on how close
And
they
it's
are
a
to it. It's
and it's extremely range limited, right?
yeah.
Like I guess if you're in battle armor, you could have like you could throw it like 2 or 3 400 yards or something like that if you've got that
But you might as
strength.
well
But
just have a launcher.
for sure, exactly, right? Like so if you're using a grenade, like in weaponized, their grenades are very localized. A lot of them are not thrown, but they're released and directed by your operating system. So like in my Hawkins character, he's half cyborg, so in his legs and hips and shoulders and stuff, he's got like different recessed compartments, and on his legs those compartments will open and the mag launchers will pop out the dazzlers or the fragmentation thermal grenades or whatever, and then the I3, the operating system, will direct them to where they need to go. He didn't even have to throw them. And
Well, that's like, I mean, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a lot of, obviously, people know about the drone use in like Ukraine,
Hmm.
and
yeah.
the explosive. There, it seems to me that a lot of explosive use and a lot of use of grenades style armament in the future is going to be taken by drones. You like, even if you don't have communications with it, like if jamming is a thing, you like put a laser designator on a target and say that's what I want blown up, and then the drone takes off and just goes for that target no matter where it goes. And because I mean,
Well, that
there was a recent video that came out of Ukraine. This Ukraine is the YouTube war, and it was two Russian soldiers on an ATV, and the guy in the back had like a body camera, you know, and this drone comes up on him and blows up and basically erases half of the guy in front, and it was
well,
like,
drones are basically like just smart grenades,
Right.
yeah,
right?
basically.
Because it's an explosion. You may or may not have a grenade style shrapnel set up on the weapon itself, but the drone itself becomes shrapnel and part of the weapon system. And it's just a small explosion for indirect fire.
And if you could put if you've got an SBC that has enough processing power you don't have to run a full LLM, but if you can do OCR on targeting, and now it can be self-directed and just go find me
Yep,
an APC and blow it up. It could be standoff,
100%.
finds the thing at once. Uh,
Yeah. And the thing about future explosions is like a lot of like you think of like a stick of dynamite now. In the future, that's going to be that the explosive potential, the potential energy in that device, a similar device in the future is going to be much smaller.
yeah.
Or you can make it much smaller. So something that's equivalent to 1 pound of TNT could be like 1 ounce of explosive, depending on what kind of technology or what type of explosive you're
Well, and
using.
think about the
Uh,
beepers that Israel deployed. Like, it's not
yeah.
about size. It's not about the size of the explosive. It's like where it's directed, where it isn't. Like, is it in the right place at the right time with the right amount of energy that you need? And
It's not the size of your explosive, it's how you use it.
well, they
There's
proved
a
that.
bit in the book that I'm reading now, which is it's by Vince Flynn. It's like the third or fourth one in his original Mitch Rapp series, and I can't remember what the title is now, but this terrorist basically is talking about one of his uh it's either him or the Mossad. Anyway, it doesn't matter. One of his best operations was putting like an ounce explosive in a cell phone and
Mhm.
then taking and the cell phone worked, and then he took the call on the cell phone and handed it to this guy and like, oh, the phone's for you, and then walked off, and then that 1 ounce charge went poof and just killed him. And so yeah, I mean it could be a really really tiny explosive, but if you're going against an unarmed, I mean bodies are really fragile, dude. They're super fragile. It doesn't take very much to do that kind of damage.
Mhm.
I really I enjoy if you want, and if people are interested, I can do some actual brush up on explosive technology and stuff like that. If you got like really specific questions, I can nail down. I've only done one story that's related to EOD work, and I had to be really careful to not put like actual uh procedures and tech into the story. I ran it by my old bomb squad commander, and I was like, I know this is what we're gonna do in real life, but is it cool if I put this in a story? Because some of that tech, like you don't want just normal people finding out about, and but I'm down for that. I love talking about
I think I
bombs.
read that story. Was that in the
It
honor?
was supposed to be in an anthology somewhere, and it
Yeah,
never got published. Yeah,
yeah, I remember that story.
Well, I'm always
yeah,
happy to encourage you to do more work, Josh. So.
right. Everybody is. Everybody is.
Yeah, like when if it's just the application of, I don't know, potential energy, where does that get boring, and how do you
Yep.
keep it interesting? You know,
There's
So,
all kinds of interesting things you can do with advanced explosives. Um, my favorite is to put them inside of a pressure chamber and shoot all that thermal energy out of a lasing rod.
yeah. Or like rail guns. I mean, that's not explosive at all. That's just magnets or
Well, current
electromagnetic
railguns
energy.
yeah.
And
Well, and you
sometimes
create.
use explosives.
I mean,
yeah,
that's one of the things that people didn't realize about the latest Patriot missile is it actually carries very little explosive. It's the explosive is created by the kinetic impact with the incoming missile, and
yeah.
that's all they need to, destroy it. Um, they only add an
Can you
explosive.
guys believe it's been a year on this podcast? Like, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna do some kind of
we
anniversary
are.
episode, but when I saw that in Discord the other day, I was like, holy crap, man. It doesn't feel like we've been doing this for a year.
No, it does not.
That means season two's starting soon
I know.
sometime.
Well, we did season two. Now we have season three coming up. We've been
Ah,
following
yes.
seasons. We should like plan that out.
Yeah, we should write that down somewhere so we're
I
all on
know.
the same page.
We're all plotters, but like this podcast
But
is such a good.
we're gonna have a cliffhanger for the season finale?
I know. It,
Oh, we should do one. And this is the number one thing you want to know about writing mill sci-fi.
wait until the
In
Dun,
end.
show.
dun,
Roll
dun.
credits. Yeah.
Next time. All right. Well, we're at an hour, so thanks for hanging out with us. If you got questions about or other thoughts about explosions in the future, we would love to hear them. We didn't even talk about stars. We got to talk about like military application of stars. That's cool. Um, that's
Just get a
probably
Star Killer base, man.
that's
That
on the
worked in
nuclear
Star
side.
Wars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
funnel energy from a star
Nuclear
into
vessels.
somebody's head.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for
Or
hanging out.
Dyson sphere weapons.
There you go. We'll see you next time. Take it easy.